like, and make sure to engage in comments. Also share this video to your friends and story lovers, and click on the subscribe button on the screen to subscribe to Mortifex for more real horror stories like this. There's something that happens when you grow up in fear. It sticks to your skin, seeps into your bones, and lingers in the corners of your mind, no matter how far you run. That's how it was for me. My father was a monster, the kind that didn't need the cover of night to do his damage. He left wounds you couldn't see, ones that festered in silence. And even after he was dead, he wasn't finished with me. I didn't go to his funeral. The very thought of standing over his grave, pretending to mourn, made my stomach turn. I had no love for the man. Whatever little piece of me that once wanted his approval had withered away a long time ago. My mother called, my aunt called, even my cousins telling me I should be there, that it was the right thing to do. But they didn't know. They never knew. Or maybe they did and chose to ignore it. Either way, I didn't owe him a damn thing. That weekend, I stayed in my apartment, avoiding the flood of calls and messages. I wanted to feel relief, to finally breathe knowing he was gone. But I didn't. Instead, there was a heaviness in my chest, an unease that I couldn't shake. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for sleep to take me. But sleep didn't come easy, and when it did, it came for me violently. It started with the dream. I was back in the house I grew up in, standing at the foot of the stairs. The air was thick, stale, carrying the scent of cigarette smoke and cheap liquor. I knew I shouldn't go up, but my feet moved on their own, carrying me to the room I feared the most, his room. The door was open just a crack, and inside, I could hear something shifting, the sound of breathing, deep and labored. My heart pounded against my ribs as I reached for the door, every fiber of my being screaming at me to stop. But the second my fingers touched the knob, I woke up, or at least I thought I did. I was in my bed, my body stiff as a board. My eyes were open, but I couldn't move, couldn't even blink. My room was dark, but not completely. The faint glow of my bedside lamp cast long, eerie shadows along the walls. And then I saw him. He was standing at the foot of my bed, my father. I wanted to scream, but my throat locked up. He looked exactly as I remembered, tall, broad-shouldered, with those cold, dead eyes that had haunted me for years. His lips twisted into something that might have been a smile, but it wasn't warm. It wasn't human. Did you really think I'd let you go that easy? His voice was a whisper, but it was everywhere, crawling under my skin, wrapping around my throat. I tried to move, to fight, but my body wouldn't listen. I was trapped. Then he stepped closer, and that's when I realized he wasn't alone. I wanted to believe it wasn't real, that it was just my mind playing tricks on me, twisting the memories I had buried so deep. But the air in the room was thick, wrong, the kind of wrong that settled deep in my bones, making my skin crawl. My father stood at the foot of my bed, but I knew it wasn't really him. It couldn't be. He was dead. I knew that. I had spent years waiting for that moment, dreaming of the day he would finally be gone. But now he was here, and I couldn't move. I could barely even breathe. Then I saw it, the movement in the shadows. At first it was just a ripple, a disturbance in the darkness that shouldn't have been there. But then something shifted. The shadows stretched, bending unnaturally, twisting into something that vaguely resembled human forms. They weren't fully shaped, more like silhouettes, but I knew, deep in my gut, they weren't just tricks of the light. They were watching me, and they were moving closer. My father's head tilted slightly, as if he could hear my thoughts. His smile grew wider, exposing teeth that seemed too sharp, too long. His eyes, God, his eyes weren't just dead anymore. They were hollow, deep, dark pits that seemed to stretch into nothingness. "You think you can escape me, girl?" His voice slithered around the room, curling in my ears, sinking into my chest. "You think death changes anything?" A cold weight pressed against my chest, forcing the air out of my lungs. I struggled, but my body refused to move. It was like something was pinning me down, something I couldn't see. Then the whispering started. It came from all around me, soft, distant murmurs at first, like a radio just barely out of tune. But then the voices grew louder, overlapping, colliding into each other. Some were hissing, others were sobbing. A few sounded like laughter, horrible, broken laughter that sent shivers racing down my spine. And then I heard my father speak again. "Do you remember what I used to tell you?" I knew exactly what he meant, but I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to hear it. "Go on," he urged, taking another step forward. His bare feet made no sound against the floor. "Say it." I fought against the paralysis, fought with everything I had, but my lips trembled, barely parting, and before I could stop myself, the words came out. "No one will believe you." The second I spoke, a wave of cold washed over me, so deep it burned. The shadows around me pulsed, like they were alive, like they were feeding off my fear. My father's face twisted into something sick with satisfaction, and I wanted to shut my eyes, to look away, but I couldn't, because something was climbing onto my bed. I couldn't see it at first, only felt the shift in the mattress, the slow, deliberate pressure as something heavy crawled up from the foot of my bed. My breath hitched, panic rising like a tidal wave as I tried, again and again, to move. But I was locked in place, forced to endure every second of it. Then I felt it. Hands, small claw-like fingers dragging up my legs, my stomach, pressing down on my chest. I couldn't see them, but I knew they were there. The weight of them, the coldness of their touch, the way they dug into my skin, as if testing how much pressure it would take to tear me apart. "You never cried loud enough," my father whispered, voice laced with amusement. "That's why no one came for you." The hands slid up to my throat, and then I finally saw them. The shadows weren't just forming into figures, they were forming into faces. Faces of children. Dozens of them. Their features twisted and contorted in silent screams, their hollow eyes locked onto me. Their mouths moved, but no sound came out. The only thing I could hear was the rushing in my ears, the erratic pounding of my own heart, and my father's laughter. "You're just like them now," he murmured, crouching beside me. His breath was ice cold against my cheek. Trapped. My vision blurred as the pressure on my throat grew tighter, squeezing the air out of me. The weight of all those small, cold hands pressing into my skin was unbearable. I felt my pulse hammering beneath their grip, felt my body screaming for air. My mind screamed with it. Move, move. And then the silence shattered. A loud bang erupted from somewhere outside my bedroom, like a door slamming shut with impossible force. The room shuddered, the walls groaning as if something enormous had just shifted. The hands vanished instantly, the weight lifting so fast that I gasped, finally able to suck in a desperate breath. My father's form flickered, the shadows around him distorting. His grin faltered, and then, just as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. The whispering ceased. The air in the room lightened. The shadows that had been crawling up my walls shrank back into the corners, curling away like smoke. My father was gone. I didn't move for what felt like an eternity. My body ached, my throat raw as I finally forced myself upright. My entire bed was drenched in sweat, my hands trembling violently as I clutched my sheets. I gasped for air, blinking rapidly, trying to convince myself that it was over. But I knew better, because just before everything went still, I had heard one final whisper, soft, cold, right against my ear. "I'll be back." Click on the subscribe button on the screen to subscribe to Mortifex for more real and true stories like this.